Welcome, everyone. Thank you again for joining us. Really delighted and excited to have this interviewer with us. Somebody who I've been chasing down for a few weeks, wanted to have a conversation, but he's a busy man. So today we're joined by Doug Johnson. Doug is the founder of Mesh Energy. They're a certified B Corporation, and they're an independent advisor for people who are looking for advice on innovative sustainability energy advice and general guidance for property owners and architects who want to be a bit more sustainable and more green. Doug, thank you for taking the time to spend some time with me this morning. I really appreciate it.
No problem at all. No problem at all.
So I guess the starting point, who are Mesh and why did you start Mesh?
Who are Mesh? Well, Mesh Energy, we call ourselves kind of independent building performance and design consultants. It's a bit of a kind of a funny thing. Our title seems to change all the time because there's a million and one ways that you can describe what we do. But fundamentally, we work with design teams who are trying to look at improving the sustainability of either existing buildings or new buildings or buildings that are getting extended and refurbished. So we work with a huge amount of architects and other kind of design partners to analyze buildings, look at the fabric of the buildings, how they're ventilated, how they're heated, how they're cooled, how they're lit, and a lot of elements to that. So there's a big analytical side to the business, and then there's building services design, which a lot of people historically may know as kind of M&E or mechanical and electrical engineering design. And so as a business, we try and be as independent and as holistic as we can be. We're obviously working on behalf of the client. We're not, sponsored by any manufacturers. So it doesn't matter to us what we do. What we're trying to do is just offer independent and holistic advice, for the right solutions to drive down running costs and carbon emissions of those buildings, however small or large they may be.
So why did you start Mesh? I mean, what was the sort of driver? Was there a trigger in your life or something?
Yeah, absolutely. There were a number of triggers looking back on it. I think there are two reasons. One, becoming an entrepreneur and doing my own thing and not being employed by anybody. The big trigger was just gross mismanagement by previous managers, and I just, after being mismanaged about 3 or 4 times, I said, look, this isn't working for me. There's got to be a better way. As I was older and uglier and had more experience, so I as every entrepreneur will explain, they just took a dive and kind of knew that it would work out, and it does, hopefully for most. And it did for me. I'm coming up for kind of 10 years since I've been properly kind of self-employed, if you want to call it, or an entrepreneur. So I started my own business because I couldn't be properly managed in my mind. As far as sustainability was concerned, I'm actually a qualified mechanical engineer and did engineering at university and masters and what have you. And I did that for a few years and then realized that it wasn't all that I'd spent all that time qualifying for, and got really disillusioned with engineering at an early stage, and got an opportunity to join a company that had just started up that was doing things with heat pumps and underfloor heating up in Norfolk. And so I knew nothing about renewables then, and that was back in 2008, and cut my teeth as a project manager and design team lead. And, with my technical background, I was kind of making it up as I went along. And that was my first foray into it. So it was installing equipment in people's homes, that were converting barns in Norfolk, really. So kind of what we call like a high-end residential work, quite expensive homes. And that's where I got into it. And then when I decided that I wanted to kind of do my own thing, I'd kind of fallen in love with the sector at that point, and could see a huge amount of value that we could add. And it had obviously a massive way to go, and it certainly has done over the last decade, and will continue to do so for a considerable period of time.
And in terms of you yourself and the way you view life, would you consider yourself as sort of a campaigner for sustainability, or is that too harsh a word? Or
I think campaigner is a bit of a strong word. I think it's there are. I haven't yet super glued myself to a road in the middle of the M25 yet. I think maybe, advocate might be a better term for it. I think there's, you have to be pretty closed minded now to not fully appreciate the role of the decarbonisation and just making a change to the way in which we live our lives, earn money, consume energy, look after our families. You know, you'd have to be pretty close-minded to understand that changes don't have to happen. I'm pretty pragmatic though, and understand that, you know, the human race doesn't change easily. We can solve things as quickly as we can mess things up. Technology is helping us considerably. I think there's a considerable amount of smart people and increasingly a vast amount of money that's being pumped into solving the problem. And all I can hope to do is change the thing that I've got any effect over. You know, I'm not a Steve Jobs, I'm not an Elon Musk, but I have people that sometimes listen to me. I have information that I can impart. And I think as long as everybody kind of does that, I think we can make a big change pretty rapidly. So I always speak passionately about sustainable stuff, but I wouldn't say that, you know, I'm fundamentally changing the way that I live to do my bit. I think I'm making a difference at grassroots level in a sector of the industry, the built environment, which has a huge part to play in decarbonising the UK. I'm doing nothing with the airline industry. I'm doing nothing with food production. I'm doing nothing with a whole load of other areas, but there are some great people who are doing their bit in those areas too. So I'm doing my bit, and I hope everybody else is doing their bit and speak passionately about what I'm doing. And that's surprisingly infectious. And that's the beauty of having your own business, is when you find like-minded people, you can hire them, and obviously you can make a substantial change, you know, in the way that you see as kind of productive. And so yeah, that's all I hope to do, is encourage other people to be passionate, and then pay them and help them tell other people about what you know, what can be done.
In terms of, for those like myself who don't know, you know, an awful lot about the building industry, in terms of the way we design buildings, one of the things you mentioned to me before when we were talking before this is that fundamentally there needs to be a change in the way we design buildings. Can you give us a little overview of that? I mean,
yeah, sure.
Technical, because a lot of people watching this
Sure.
don't understand some of the stuff.
The construction industry has been going for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And it's a bit like a super tanker, like any other industry, like the petrochemical industry. You know, it's slow to change, and has been very, very slow to change. It takes ages to get new regulations in. It takes ages to change the skill sets of the people that are working in that industry. You know, where the UK has a particular hang up on using bricks and blocks, and has done for, you know, 100 years plus. And it is difficult for people who have worked in that sector for many, many decades to all of a sudden be bombarded with new materials, new regulations, new ways of working, software, all these things which make them feel uncomfortable and are a necessary part of dragging that sector kicking and screaming into the, dare I say, the 21st century. We're 23 years into the century, but still, you know, we're that far behind. And adapt more quickly to what's happening in our environment. That rate of change has never been seen before, and a number of people who are in the sector for a long time are kind of stuck in their ways. And so the young uns coming in, or those who are in their middle of the careers, a bit like me really, have an obligation there to be enthusiastic, to help transition from this old way of doing things to the new way of doing things, show it to be profitable, show it to be effective, show it to, you know, show others that it can make a difference. And again, hopefully over a short period of time, it just becomes commonplace, and you change the mindset of the people who are delivering buildings, designing buildings, putting buildings up, commissioning buildings. And that's, you know, the way that buildings are designed need to change, because our environment is changing. The use of software and data is changing, and it's an industry that's been stuck in the dark ages for a long time, and now is seeing this kind of hockey stick rate of change for various reasons, a load of different reasons why it's changing. But that's why it has to change, and is creating a lot of headaches in the process, because it's a mind-bending rate of change that's needed, which people haven't been used to for a long time.
And one of those areas you mentioned to me on email when we spoke is that the experience increasingly means very little. Does that mean that because the rate of change, it's more about innovation forward rather than experience of what's been done before?
Yeah, that's right. As I mentioned kind of previously when we were talking, experience counts for less and less. I mean, experience means a lot when not a lot's changing. I think when there is a lot of change, experience does mean less, because either the fundamentals are changing or there are new things that are affecting certain outputs. And we have to look forward. There is of course some use in learning from mistakes made in the past, but that was a different time. That was a different set of variables, maybe different materials being used, different timescales, different different amounts of money rolling around, just generally kind of different conditions in which were being operated, and that timescale is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. So yeah, looking forward is absolutely critical. But again, one of the things that people struggle with is, particularly people who've been in a sector for a long time, some obviously lord it over the others. Let's take a graduate versus somebody who's been in the sector for 50 years. There's this kind of unwritten, I'm better than you because I know more than you do, and now it's time for me to impart what I know, for those who are a bit more educated to impart that. And there's this kind of looking up or looking down. But now you're seeing this leveling, because what's happened over the last 2 years has completely upturned what a lot of people have been doing for the last 50 years. So somebody who came out of university 2-3 years ago could easily be on the same learning curve as somebody who'd been in the sector for 50 years. And again, that blows a lot of people's minds, and a lot of people will roll their eyes and say, well, oh, no, but I've done 300-400 yeah, but they were under old regulations. You might be more familiar with talking with builders, QSs and that kind of stuff, but they're being turned around and turned upside down, and they're learning new materials, that the new information that's coming out. Nobody finds that out 10 years before. If a new regulation comes out, everybody learns the new regulation or adapts to the new regulation. Same with the new material, new building material. I haven't had 10 years worth of foresight. Philip, if you were in the same industry, we'd be learning at the same rate. And that is, experience does mean less, because again, the rate of change of technology, materials, regs and things like that, and I find that really exciting, and I think there are a number of people who do find that really exciting, but unfortunately there are a lot of people that find that unsettling, and just can't deal with change maybe quite as well as others.
I was going to say change is difficult for all sectors, so it's it's not on its own.
Yeah.
There, we've the
So
same.
It's a human condition. Like I'm happy when not a lot is changing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've in some of the other episodes, we got 2 episodes of Ket Patel, who change management expert, and he talks. That's what he does for a living, helping people go through change. In terms of like the future of design of sustainable buildings, what does that look like? Is all design going to be done on virtual reality first, or is that one of the key things, or is it more about the physical materials and design and actually building sustainability into the building? For example, solar. Like, I mean, I don't understand why all new houses don't have solar panels as standard.
Sure.
I guess it's cost comes into that, but that's my simplest man on the street view of it. So I don't know what
Sure.
are you thinking design?
I mean, I think there are kind of different levels on it. There's the kind of the stick approach from regulation, whereas the stuff that you've got to put into a building, or the amount of insulation, or the types of materials and things that you can use to meet kind of minimum criteria for the building. But and so there's that change with compliance and regulations and stuff, but that's not really where that is a measure of progress, in as much as buildings are better insulated, they're better ventilated, health and well-being's being considered. They're not overheating as much. That's one level of progress. But I think the biggest change for the industry in a kind of a practical sense is a bit like, kind of caveman, like chipping some letters into a stone tablet, which we still come across the odd kind of couple of architects that are hand drawing stuff on boards with wires and pulleys and kind of rulers and stuff like that. And to be fair, they haven't got many years left of their career, because they're just kind of hanging on to these kind of old ways of just simply producing a 2D drawing. But the way the big change that is coming is really about integration of people who are contributing to that project. So if we had 10 people on this call, and we had a quantity surveyor, and you had a sustainability consultant, you had the architect, and you had the client, and you had a load of other specialists, historically we would be kind of working in our own silos. We'd get together for a meeting, we'd go back to working in our own silos, producing our own drawings, interpreting what other people were doing, go back to producing our own drawings, modifying our own drawings, and eventually kind of cobble together, hand off what we're doing, they hand it off to somebody else, and eventually kind of get to the end of the project, and everybody's hopefully happy. The big change is coming in using software and centralizing, a bit like a lot of other sectors, centralizing information and access to information. So rather than having 10 different models or drawings or interpretation of a scheme, you have a centralized model. And this is particularly the case for kind of government projects, which tend to be leading, and the bigger practices who've got more money to spend on software are asked to do it as well. There's a thing called kind of building information modeling. And so you have this kind of centralized model where everybody has access to it. They have bits to them which are important, and you kind of layer it up. So you have somebody who's kind of coordinating that central model. You can interrogate the model not only about your bit, but somebody else's bit. Changes are immediately picked up, and it's there in the center. So rather than quite a linear stepping stone way of organizing a project, is very much kind of hub and spoke. So you've got this model and data sharing that's very central to the project, and then everybody can kind of dip in the whole way around, regardless of what their role is. But there's still a way to go there. I mean, still a lot of people are working in 2 dimensions, let alone 3 dimensions, let alone centralized modeling of projects. And that's where people and companies will become more and more irrelevant. They just can't keep up with modern ways of sharing data.
And in terms of encouraging people to change, I mean, one of the arguments that I often hear against sort of making changes towards being more sustainable is cost. Times are tighter, prices are increasing. Yesterday there was good news about salaries and whatnot. Today there's bad news. They said the UK markets fell behind in terms of July, down to weather, which is surprise. But how do you get around that argument? Is there an economic argument for sustainability in building?
I think yes and no. I mean, if I was being really, if I was, I can't remember, think of the kind of the proper word for this, but if I really kind of zoomed out, I think you hear a lot of people use this argument, which is what cost you put on the fact that the Earth warms up by another 5 degrees.
Yeah.
And we start spending billions and billions and billions and billions and billions on solving flooding, wildfires. We're killing tens, hundreds of thousands of people a year. We've got mass migration, so you can think about it at that kind of really high level. What is the price that you would actually put on some consistently cataclysmic events in the world for the sake of moving things on and decarbonizing the world? But practically, again, at kind of grassroots level, what we're seeing is you always have people whinging. You always have people wanting to spend less. You always have people wondering why they've got to invest another 5% to move things on a bit. Well, bizarrely, those people are happy to pay more money for something really, really whimsical, and they'll happily pay another 10%, and then something else which is even more critical and probably has a lot more longevity, they kind of put their hands up and say no, it's either the same price or bust. But I think practically you should have, in any sector, and you have companies who are pushing the boundaries, they're doing the right things, there's more care, effort and attention that goes into them. And a classic example, you can pick out a few names from the car industry, for example, more expensive cars that are pushing the boundaries. Tesla's a good one. And they put it out there, they put it out there. Not everybody wants to buy their product, but they're moving the chess pieces further and further. And by doing that, other people learn what they're doing. They share their information. Tesla's a very famous one for sharing their IP for free. And those things make it into other vehicles. They firstly make it into 2 vehicles, then 20 vehicles, then 2,000 vehicles. The costs then start coming down because other savings are being made. Clever way. Yes, initial investment has to be made by certain companies, but then you get economies of scale. The cost starts coming down. So all of a sudden, for the same price as a vehicle was 10 years ago that was using a different technology or a different way of doing things, you've got a car that has made a difference, or a process that's made a lasting difference, is becoming more the kind of the status quo. And you're getting more for the same money. I mean, money gets more and more worthless as every day goes by as well. And I think that's it's you'll always get people who grumble about that, but I think particularly when it comes to sustainable construction, there are so many other factors, not least including value of the property. Now, values of properties are being degraded if they're not sustainable, and that's coming out in the data that we're seeing. But also desirability, corporate branding. It's not just about this is expensive for expensive sake. It's actually the cost of progress, but also businesses and stakeholders remaining relevant. And so again, it's a multifaceted thing, but it's a key part of process improvement and ultimately changing the way that things are done. Is always going to be more expensive. Double glazing was expensive for a lot of people 30 years ago. Now it's triple glazing, and how many people have single glazing because they can't afford double glazing? Not many people. And it's a simplified thing, but that's my description of it anyway.
I was going to say, if we had more time, maybe if people want to contact you on LinkedIn, they can ask you questions about your opinion on RAC and the concrete and all the schools and whatnot. But we won't get to that now. But we'd be here for a little while. But it's been an absolute delight speaking to you. The question I'd be keen for you just to leave you with, and for an answer for you to leave people with, given your experience and your entrepreneurial spirit, and you've gone out there and done it, what would your advice be to your 21-year-old self? Leaving, you're just about to go into the world of work.
Yeah.
Just about to go and experience it. What any key elements, any key takeaways you'd give to your 21-year-old self?
I was having a think about this. I don't know. I'm not sure I would change the journey. I think a lot of people, hindsight's a wonderful thing. Why did I bother doing that? Because that was a total waste of 5 years of my time. Or, I lost a load of money because I took that chance and it didn't pan out. I'm not sure that I would change the journey, because I think the mistakes that you make you not make those mistakes in the future. If you don't make mistakes and you don't waste money and you don't put your foot in it and you don't do these other kind of things, and you don't also have successes along the way, they don't form the thing that you've become. So I would hate to erase any of the journey that's got me to here, because I wouldn't be speaking to you in the way that I'm doing, and maybe not even speaking to you at all if we hadn't done those things. But I think as far as looking back and just tapping myself on the shoulder and saying, have a think about doing this, follow the same journey, but have a think about doing this, I think it would mainly be about confidence and risk. I came from a fairly risk averse kind of upbringing. I mean, my parents weren't, particularly risky people, and my father certainly wasn't an entrepreneur in the sense of the word. He was a career, he was a career employee, I suppose you want to call it that, for a big company, ICI. And I think I would just give myself more confidence to do stuff at an earlier age. I think a lot of people ask for too much permission to do things, and they're like, oh, well, I'm not sure, I need another year to kind of figure this out. And people ask for too much permission. I think people need to freestyle it a bit more, not take unnecessary risks, but take some risks and be confident in in what they know. And don't make the gross assumption that everybody around you knows way more than you do, because it's never, ever the case. We all assume that. So that's what I would tell myself, is just be more confident, go for it. If you've got an inkling, try it out, see what happens. The world is not going to end. The sun's going to keep coming up and going down. You're going to survive. You'll be absolutely fine. So I think that's what I would tell my 21-year-old self.
Perfect. That's a great way to end it. Doug, it's been a delight speaking to you. Thank you so much. For anyone who wants to reach out to you, I know they can find you on LinkedIn, and of course they can find you at mesh-energy.com and check out your business and see what you're all about. Thanks for the time today, and hopefully you'll get a chance to speak soon, or maybe you'll get a chance to hopefully you'll speak at one of our events in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. No problem at all. Thanks for that.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.